this week we're featuring prophet, Pastor Brenda Blackmon from the Crestview area. She is an ex-military wife. She is now presently pastoring with her and her husband. She's a prophet, but she's a real woman that experienced some grief that I hope most of us have not had to experience. She lost a 2-year-old son, or a little older than maybe 2.5, went in for a surgery, and the chaplain showed up to give her the news. She's very transparent in talking about the shock and her inability to grieve, and then how her oldest son, that was actually a psychology major, helped her, told her that she needed to grieve. Years later, maybe 10, a little more than 10 years later, he's completed his degree, and very brilliant young man, and he committed suicide. Never able to recover his body. She talks about the experience and what she is going through now. So I hope that this will minister to you. I am a pastor. I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist. So I do not give you permission or asking you to overlook what your doctor may say, but I'm giving you the spiritual side and the emotional side of it, and hoping that you'll walk away with some nuggets that will enhance your life.
More than we can ask or think, more than we can imagine in our wildest dreams. By His blood I have been redeemed, and in His mercy He kept me. Who wouldn't let my enemies triumph over me?
Lost my first son when I was around 27 years old, and he was 2.5.
Wow. What happened there?
Well, he was born with a heart condition, and they had did 2 surgeries on him, and the second surgery that they was doing is the surgery that they knew he should have survived. They didn't see any reason why he should have passed, because they had the technique to do this type of surgery. We were flown all the way to Rochester, Minnesota,
Wow.
to one of the best hospitals in the world, and so they didn't understand why he passed.
Okay.
But he passed at 2.5 years old, and, that was my first loss.
And you were 26. How did you handle that?
Well, at first, I really didn't. When it came to me, I actually heard my son call me. I was at a lodge because we couldn't stay at the hospital. So we was at a lodge where they put my husband at that time, my former husband, and I up. And I was in there, and around 8 o'clock that morning, I heard my son's voice as if he was over in the room with me. And he called me. He said, "Mama, Mama." And I jumped up and I looked around, and I realized I was in my room. I wasn't at the hospital. And so I got up to get dressed, and his father said to me, he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to see about our son." And he was like, "No, you don't need to go this early." I said, "No, he called me." And he was like, "How can you hear his voice? And the hospital's way over there."
And at that time, were you aware that you were a prophet? Were you aware that you were pastors? It was just that mother's instinct, mother with that connection with your child?
I think that's what it was at that time. I was a minister, but I was not, at that time engaged into the prophet's role and the gifts of the
Okay.
And so I just think it was my mother intuition that woke me up to know, because at that same self hour is when my son was transitioning.
Wow.
Because when I got to the hospital and everything, they were standing around his bed, but that wasn't unusual for me because, he was in ICU. And so when I got ready to go over there, they told me to hold on and to just wait. And I'm like, "Yeah, but my son is calling me." And it was like, "No, Miss Robinson," that was my name at that time, "you need to just wait and call your husband and have him to come." So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But I called his father and asked him to come on over to the hospital. And they sent a chaplain to come up. And I'm like, well, why is they sending me a chaplain? I had watched movies before.
You had no clue at that time.
Not that my son was dying, but to have a chaplain did puzzled me a little bit because I knew usually they come to give the right of death to somebody.
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, why they sending me a chaplain, because I'm waiting to see my son. But they send me to not the regular waiting room, but they send me to a waiting room where the chaplain comes in to talk with the family. And so this chaplain came in and he began to talk with me. And I was okay because he was talking about the Lord. And that was my life.
Your anchor.
Yeah, that's my life. Let's talk about the
Yes.
Lord. But while we was talking, the doctor and a nurse walked in. And they looked at me and they said to me, they said, Miss Robinson, we lost little Arthur. And I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. I kept engaging
You
in my
went into
conversation.
denial, or you
Yes,
numbed out.
exactly. And so they noticed that I didn't
Shock.
respond. Yeah.
Yes.
So the doctor said it to me again. He said, Miss Robinson, we have lost little Arthur. And when he said that to me, I began to look at him and I told him no. I said no. And he said yes. And so I looked at the chaplain because this is a man of God. And surely you're going to tell me no. And he said yes. So I looked at my son's father and I said, no, our son is not dead. And he dropped his head and he was crying and he said yes. So I knew there was only one place left to look, and that was toward heaven. And I looked toward heaven and I said to God, no.
Yeah.
But I could hear the resounding sound of heaven say yes.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I knew
Yeah.
that this is true, that my baby's gone.
So just that quickly, you move from shock to bargaining. No,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
bargaining.
yes.
No. No to the doctor. No to the chaplain.
Yeah.
No to heaven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Send another answer.
Yeah, got to
That's
be
another solution.
Got to be.
Until you just worked past and walked into
I went to his room,
acceptance.
yes.
But after the baby died and you made it through that and you came out of that, you left the hospital, what did you do from there? And then go to the son,
Well, actually,
the second son, I'm
yes,
sorry.
everything just came kind of fast because I'm in a state, where we are not from.
Okay.
So I got to make immediate plans to get my son to be flown back to Georgia. So in the midst of me being told that my baby had passed, they took me down to his room where he was at. Wow. And just seeing him laying there, he was just like he was asleep. And his little body was still warm. So to me, I still, in a sense, had my baby, And so I went over where he was and I touched him and, I just wanted him to say my name again, call me mommy again and stuff. And so I just leaned on him and I kissed him and everything. And I just was holding him and they let me know they gotta take him. And so they asked me who I want to receive his body. And I'm in a place
You
where
didn't have a clue.
I didn't have a clue. I didn't know exactly. I don't know any funeral homes here. I don't know who to turn his body over to. So the chaplain kind of made a recommendation, for somebody to get my body and then his body. And we had him flown back to Georgia. And so while waiting on his body, I had to catch the flight back, to fly back home. But it was just real devastating because I was still in a place of denial that my son is going to come back. I'm going to get my son. So I wasn't dealing with it right away. Even when I got home and stuff, I was just strong for everybody else because my rest of my family was so torn by it because it was just a sudden death. Like Mother said, everybody else was in just such a bad place, and I couldn't stand to see my family hurting so bad, and my other children, because I had 3 more children, and my oldest son was really taking it real hard. So I had to be strong to try and help my children to deal with the loss of of their sibling. So I didn't face it at that particular time. And even at the homegoing, because I'm, born again and in holiness, we believe in praising God at the homegoings and not doing all the crying. So I literally was just up trying to praise God.
Isn't it amazing how we can preach the gospel and overlook the gospel? We forget about Ecclesiastes. To everything there's a season, a time to die, a time to rejoice, a
Yes.
time to cry. We can just rip that page right out
Yeah.
and ride out tradition and
Yeah.
religious
Yeah.
jargon, if I
Yeah,
can call
yeah,
it that
yeah.
rhetoric that doesn't make any sense,
Yes.
feel like crying, but I'm going to have to dance.
Yeah.
I feel like crying, but I'm going to have to rejoice, not understanding the scripture gives me permission to have those seasons.
Yeah. So I just, I really didn't deal with that death. And so he died in 84, that child did. And all the way from 84 to 94, I was going through the grieving. I was still away, but I never would let people know how hard it was
pain
for
of
me.
what you were feeling.
For what I was feeling, because I was a minister. I was, doing things in the church, and I was having the help of the people. So I never let people know the full extent of my pain. I would go to work, and when I would leave, take a break, I would go to the bathroom. And I would just cry and cry in the bathroom. And then when I hear somebody come in, I would hurry up and stop crying and try to, compose myself and get back out there, because people on the job was looking up to me. They was looking for my strength. So I just couldn't let them know I'm crying about this lost son. So it was in 94 when my oldest son, whom I mentioned, that's the second son I lost, but it was this son who had went off to college, and he was taking psychology.
How old was his son?
This son, that when I lost him, he was 29 years old.
So 10 years, was it 10 years between the death of the first son?
The first one died in 84, and the second son died in 2005.
Wow, okay.
So, but this, in 94, this son was the one that was helping me when he was taking a course in college about, psychology, about grief. He was taking a course about grief. And so he remembered that I was still going through it. So he helped process me to come through that loss with that son. He told me things to do, because I felt like the own that he was dead was to say I had to let him go.
Wow, okay.
And so he helped me to understand, no, Mom, you're not never telling him that you're letting him go just because you say goodbye. But you need to go ahead and say goodbye, because I had not said goodbye to him. So he had me to write a letter.
Yeah.
And he said, write the letter as if you were saying these words to him. And it took me probably about 10 times to finally process a letter to write to him and tell him, because I wasn't there when he passed, and that's what I felt guilty about.
And that was a ritual that's a part of the grief.
Yeah.
Good.
So I didn't get to tell him bye. And so that's what I did in that letter. And when I did that, it did help me to recover from that grief, with that. But then...
Well, rituals are good. Most people try to talk you out of them, but they're really good because it helps you to process your feelings.
Yes.
It helps you. That's a part of the grief work.
Right. And that's what that son told me. He said, Mom, this is going to help you. And it did.
Grief is a natural response to losing someone or something that is important to you. The stages of grief and mourning are universal and are experienced by people from all walks of life. For your gift of any amount, we will send you Dr. Rosier's teaching on seasons of pain, death, and grief. For your gift of $25 or more, we will send you Healing the Whole Person, Spirit, Body, and Soul, along with Seasons of Pain, Death, and Grief on CD. For your gift of $50 or more, we will send you the previous offerings, plus Prophetic Insight for 2017. For your gift of $100 or more, we will send you all of today's offerings and the Journey On series on CD. To place your order, please visit our website, byrosier.org, or you may call and speak with a representative at 810-DREAM08. Thank you for supporting Let the Prophet Speak and helping us reach the nations.
January, before the new year came in, 2005 came in, I had said to the Lord, I said, Lord, because I hold everybody so dear, I said, Lord, this time I'm going to release everybody in your hand. And I went down the list.
Did you know he was passing?
No, not at all. But he knew something was going on, because, the type of death this son died was different. It was a planned death.
Okay. What happened with this son?
This son committed suicide.
Okay.
So I was told.
What does that mean? So I was told.
I don't have a body.
Do you have a letter from him?
I did get a letter from him telling me that if I did receive this letter, that it could only mean one thing, that he had succeeded in taking his life.
Okay.
But because of the way that he supposedly took his life, they was not able to recover his body. So they said to me.
Okay.
He jumped off of the Bay Bridge in Belmont, California. And so I never got a body. I just got a call to tell me that my son had committed suicide. And this was right after, it was in January that I told the Lord, I give you all my children. I released them in your hand. I released my parents. I released everybody into the hands of the Lord. You know, and so when we do that, we, you know, at least in my mind, that means God's going to prevent anything from happening to any of them. And so when I got that call in February, because that was January when I did that.
You released him in
January.
And you received a phone call in February,
February the
saying...
3rd, just almost a month later after I said that, I got a call and it was said to me that my son had jumped off the Bay Bridge.
Did they make sure someone was with you, or were you by yourself when you received this call?
I was at my home and my husband was there, you know, when I got the call. A friend from California called me and told me. It wasn't the police or anything. It was one of his friends that called me and told me. And so I had to make arrangements to fly to California to, you know, look into what had happened and to get all his belongings and stuff like that.
So was there a witness that saw him jump? The reason they were able to tell you that he had committed suicide?
The person that told me that he had committed suicide was the person that he had told that he was going to do it.
Okay.
And when he was headed, this person said when he was headed to go and do it, this person said he called him and told him, he said, I'm on my way to, you know, take my life. And I feel like, this is just my thoughts on it, I feel like my son was telling this person, because usually when people commit suicide, they're not necessarily telling somebody they're doing it. They usually just go and do it. So I feel like he was crying out for help because my son also was into a lifestyle of homosexuality. So this was his partner that he had called. And I feel like he was calling him to tell him this because he wanted him to come and to stop him because he had done this threat before. You know, so I was told later that my son had threatened before to do this and didn't carry out. But when I got my son's letter, he began to detail to me some things, as well as he wrote a book. You know, my last 13 days before my death, my last 14 days before my death.
He wrote a book?
He wrote a book. I got a book that he wrote. He sent it to 4 publishers.
Wow.
And they didn't receive it because they said it was too gloomy and too
morbid.
Yeah. Was too much pain in it. So they wouldn't publish it. He sent it back and wouldn't publish it. But in his book, he talks about how he tried, you know, how he looked into things to do to take his life, and how he came to the conclusion that this was the best route to go because this would be probably the route that would really take him out, you know. So
you mentioned that, which is does not give you closure.
Yes.
That it robs you of a ritual. Funerals are rituals that help us to work through grief, to be able to see that person in the casket, to be able to view them maybe before you cremate them, to see them like with your baby, that you're able to go in and still hug that baby and kiss that baby. You did not have the finality of that with this son. What was his name?
Derek.
Derek. So you didn't have that with Derek.
Right.
How were you, is that one of the reasons why you did not have an opportunity to grieve him? How did you handle the news of that, and how are you working through that?
Well, getting his letter in there, he said to me, "Mother, do not grieve for me as long as you did my brother."
Wow.
he said, go on to your greatness because you are destined to greatness. He said, Mother, I know that you think that if someone commits suicide, that they go to hell. He said, but Mama, I want you to know, I asked God to forgive me for everything. He said, but Mama, my pain is too great, and I cannot continue to live.
Wow.
And for this reason, I must go. And so in his letter, he explained to me, some of his pain and some of his need to just not continue to live. As a matter of fact, he even sent us a video and where he sit in front of the camera and he talked to each and every one of us.
Wow.
He even went to a lawyer and drawed up his will. And the lawyer, when I went to California, told me, he said, I never seen a young man as intelligent as your son who sit here in my office. He said, usually I have a time limit that I have with people when they come in to talk to me. He said, but your son was so intelligent and so intellectual. He said that I spent longer than I usually do with people talking to your son. He said, I never had any idea, Miss Blackmon, not the faintest idea that your son was contemplating taking his life when he had me to draw his will up. He said, I never would have thought such a bright young man would do that. And this was a smart child. This was a child who graduated from high school with a 4-year academic scholarship to any college that he wanted to go to. This is a son that graduated from college, magna cum laude, stayed on the dean list the whole time he was in college. A son that landed a great job, buying his own place and a home, beautiful home, and all of that. But it was a son that was tormented.
And so where does that leave you?
It still leaves me because I can't believe still, I guess, to be honest, that he would do this, to me, because my son loved me so. And so I can't believe he would leave me like that. But then I guess what makes me accept it, because I don't believe, too, that he would write me such a letter, send me a video, and not done what he said he done. So deep down inside me, because I don't have his body and I don't have his remain, I believe a part of me still try to hold on to that. One day he's going to surprise me because he's so smart and so intelligent that maybe he just, because he was struggling with that and because he knew what I stand for and he knew that I loved him, but maybe he moved somewhere. Maybe he went somewhere, and that one of these days he's going to come back and realize how much this has affected me, and he's going to make it right. So I think deep down I still hold on to the maybe.
Yeah. You're still in denial, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. We're going to pray for those mothers that perhaps have the same plight that you have, that have gone through that, that's going through that they're just not ready to move to that next stage because it's just too painful. And since the Lord has pulled the scab off with you,
Yes.
and he's causing the infection to ooze out, which says he's about to make another move to bring you out of the shock of it. Excuse me, I'm emotional about it because it's a child.
Yes.
But to bring you out of the shock and help you work through the anger and work through the other stages of grief and the bargaining so that you can come through on the other side.
Right.
Because your health is important.
Yes.
Living a long time and being in good health. Your emotional well-being.
Yes.
Mental stability, as Elder Drusi mentioned, that the doctor said she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. We can break from the pressure of it.
And I think that's what might be trying to transpire because of the other deaths in 2013 when our church van had a crash and we lost 3 of our members. One of them was my great niece.
Wow.
And one of them was a little girl who was like a niece. And then a lady that was, just like my sister. And so I had to funeralize all 3 of them, being that I was one of the pastors of the ministry, because the families wanted me to be the one to preach at their funeral.
Okay.
And so I didn't get to properly grieve because I had to do that. I didn't get to properly grieve because at my brother's funeral, I preached my brother's funeral. So I didn't get to properly grieve with my brother. And with my mom and my dad, I was supposed to do theirs, but I asked my brother to do that, So I guess it's just so many close, and that was right behind, my son in 2005, and then my dad in 2006, my mom in 2012, my great niece in 2013, and then the mother that passed in the van, her son, 3 months after that, and then the family asked me to eulogize him, and he was like in his 30s. So it was just, bam, right.
It's very traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I see now that it is possible that I haven't dealt with those losses the right way.
Lord, I thank you so much for this pastor, for this prophet, and I thank you for every apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, and God, I just thank you for every parishioner, every person that's watching. Lord, for those that's dealing with the trauma of what their children are going through and the pain that they're going through that may have caused them to take their own life. I'm asking you to heal the hurt, to walk them, to help them to do the grief work. For those parents, Lord, that have had to be strong for everyone else, and Lord, and they have not had the opportunity to bear their pain, to show others where they're hurting. I thank you for accepting parishioners, for people, for family members that would accept the fact that they're in pain, that they're human, that would not attack their humanity, but give them the opportunity to be human beings and to grieve the loss, to feel the loss, to work through the emotional trauma that they've endured, having to bury so many individuals. That was somewhat of a sad scenario, but it's life. We all lose someone. We're born and somebody passes away, and we have to know how to deal with grief. And the church world, the world that I know, is notorious about avoiding the conversation, but it's time that we have the conversation and understand that just saying I'm sorry and singing a song and dancing is not a cure-all. It doesn't matter how strong you are in the faith and how much you love the Lord and how much you speak in tongues. You are a human being and you are affected by grief. If you lost money, lost a job, lost a home, lost some dreams, lost a marriage, there are so many things that you can lose that you have to take time to grieve it. So join us on the journey as we complete the grief series. Thank you for joining us this week on Let the Prophet Speak. See you next time.
More than we can imagine in our wildest dreams. By his blood I have been redeemed, and in his mercy he kept me. Who wouldn't let my enemies triumph over